السلام عليكم.
وعليكم السلام.
Alhamdulillah. Jazakallah khair for coming. Again, we've got Sayyida Shams, Shaykh Shams back. Last time he gave an amazing talk, and alhamdulillah, he's come down today, inshallah, to fill our hearts with love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and to teach us something we didn't know before, inshallah. And if not, a reminder is always good. And without further ado, Sayyida Shams.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. You can hear me okay? Yeah, inshallah. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في محكم تنزيله بعد أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وما خلقت الجن والإنس إلا ليعبدون صدق الله العظيم وبلغنا رسوله الكريم ونحن على ذلك لمن الشاهدين والشاكرين والحمد لله رب العالمين ثم أما بعد. Inshallah, the topic, and I'll just get straight into it, the topic that was given to me to try and talk a little bit about, as Sidi was mentioning, he said to give us, to pour us, or what did you say? To fill our hearts with what was it?
Fill our hearts with love for Allah.
With love for Allah. You can't pour something that you don't have. If you have an empty vessel, you can pour the vessel, but if there isn't anything inside of it, then nothing's going to come out. So that bit I disagree with. That's not the objective of today, because I genuinely believe that, and I think the topic that we're talking about is probably the most important topic, period. I mean, it sounds like a cliche on a poster, doesn't it? Connecting our hearts. Was that what was it?
Connecting your heart to the divine.
Connecting your heart to the divine. It sounds in our day, in a day which is so faithless in the type of world that we live in, that it's almost like a cliche to say that. Connecting, oh, you're right, I get it, Muslim, connect your heart to Allah, we get it, and then we move on. But really, that's the spirit and soul of everything. Like every other religious topic that you do, if this one doesn't exist, then all of them are what? They're in vain. They're useless, aren't they? They're absolutely void of any blessings, of any point. If this one, so this is actually an important topic. And so let me begin, and I say this without any, without any whatever, just this is me being genuine when I say this, that this is one of those topics that I do not believe that I could say to you that, I'm going to tell you from my personal experience how to connect your hearts to Allah. Because I don't think that that's something that's so easy that I can sit here and say that. I don't think I can say that. I don't believe that that's something that I've been able to achieve, but that's something that the mashayikh achieve over a lifetime of effort. Do you see the point that I'm trying to make here? That this is something so profound, it's so huge. What in Arabic is called al-ma'iyya, to be with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is so profound that it takes a lifetime of journey. It takes a lifetime of struggle. And this is why the people, our mashayikh, those awliya and those saintly people, when they write their books, for example, or they teach their students, there's a certain feeling that you get in reading their works or listening to their words, that you know that this is coming from direct experience. That those mashayikh have directly experienced what they're telling us. That's a whole different thing. That's not the claim here. The claim here is, what do the mashayikh say? What have the ulama and the scholars and those saintly individuals who have travelled on this path for a lifetime? They've grown old in grappling and wrestling with their own egos and lower selves, and have been able to subsequently speak about their experiences in order to help the rest of us on that journey. That's really what it's all about. So in removing that pressure and saying, what have our scholars, what have the awliya taught us about this particular journey, which is called suluk? That's what that means, that suluk. It's spiritual wayfaring, which is trying to reach that connection with Allah, where the slave has almost forgotten, if not forgotten himself and his own life and wants and desires for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's what that means. To not really want anything anymore. For those, I'm sure you're going to sing at the end the qasaid, probably Imam al-Haddad's qasida, قَدْ كَفَانِي عِلْمُ رَبِّي مِنْ سُؤَالِي وَاخْتِيَارِي. And what's the first line of his qasida? He says, knowledge of my Lord has sufficed me from asking any questions or making any choices. Meaning I don't question anything anymore. I recognize that the decree has already been written. I recognize that control is in the hands of Allah. And so I don't question and I don't choose anymore. That's to totally forget yourself. That I don't matter anymore. But it is Allah's will which is the only thing that matters. And the only thing that will happen. And so he mentions that, and that's probably, if not, you can recite that at the end, inshallah ta'ala.
You have to know, don't
you? Of course, now you have to. So that's that. That's what that means, to have that. And so I think, in what I've just mentioned, an important place for anybody who wants to wayfare to Allah, the important place for me, or for anybody else, the beginning place should be exactly there. Is a recognition of inability. Is actually to just recognize that I'm not actually able to do what the title of this talk says. I can't do that. That's not in my hands. That's not beneath my will. I do not have that. Allah, fa'alun lima yurid. Allah is the one that does what He wants. Al-amru kulluhu lillah. See, the affair is entirely God's. Al-qudratu kulluha lillah. Allah's omnipotence is Allah's power is the only thing that exists in this world. Allah's power. I don't have any of that power. So if I'm trying to connect with Allah, the first point or the first reflection I need to have is actually, what is that relationship? I can't claim to have a relationship with Allah if I don't know what it means to have a relationship. And so the first point of reflection is to recognize He's Allah, the one that can choose to have me as His slave. And He can choose to bring me close. And He can choose to favor me with His graces. And He can choose to connect me to Him. He can choose to make my heart absorbed in His love. He can choose those things. I don't have that choice. That's not my role. I am an abd. I am a slave. I am incapable. Everything in existence is tahat al-qudra al-ilahiyya. It's beneath the divine power or the divine omnipotence. Allah's qudra is the only thing that exists. Everything else is a manifestation of God's power. So the beginning should be a beginning of humility. To say, actually, I am not able to do this. I am useless. Literally useless. I can do nothing. My hands are tied and I have no power or no will. And that's the beginning of the journey. Right there. I remember I asked Shaykh Abdul Hakim Murad, many of you will know of him. I remember I asked him a question once. I said, how does somebody begin the journey? Like, I can't even find the road, let alone journey on that long motorway to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I can't find the road. I can't see this. My tom-tom stopped working, the battery's dead. It's just I can't find the way. Where does it begin? And you know what he said? He said the beginning of that journey is a self or an inward realization that I'm really unwell on the inside. That I'm a mess on the inside. That the inside is not what it's supposed to be. And that realization should scare you enough to think, what am I going to do about it? What am I going to do about that? Because I'm just not there. And so the beginning has to be a recognition of, I'm not there. My heart is not connected to Allah. And I don't even have the power to do that. But it's Allah. And so that moment of turning, and that moment of realization, and to humble ourselves, and to lower our heads before the King of all Kings, and say, Ya Allah, if you don't guide me, I will not be guided. If you do not help me, then I cannot receive any help. If you do not open the doors for me, then there is no way that the doors can be opened for me. That right there is the beginning of suluk. Is a realization that I am an abd and he is the ma'bud. That I am mamluk, I am a slave, and he is the malik. He is the king. He is the sultan. He is everything and I am nothing. That's the beginning of that journey. And so, the question that one may ask is, well, if I don't have any say in my guidance, only Allah, يَهْدِي مَنْ يَشَاءُ وَيُضِلُّ مَنْ يَشَاءُ, He guides whom He wills and He misguides whom He wills. If all of that is in the hands of my Lord, then what's my purpose of being here? What's my purpose? Why am I here? And that Allah responds to in the Quran when He says, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. Your job is to try. Because I did not create jinn or man except to worship. Ibadah. That is your purpose. Whether that ibadah pays off or not, whether there is any effect in that worship, whether there's any outcome, any results of that, that's in Allah's hands. I don't choose that. But my job is like a slave who turns up to the door of the master, of the king, and the king says, go and do this. Now whether he rewards me or punishes me for doing what he asked me to do is in his hands. But as a abd, what's my job? To just do what he says. It doesn't matter anymore whether he gives me Jannah or whether he gives me Jahannam, because I don't have a choice in that anyway. So what's the point of me even trying to think about those things? Of course, they're handy and that's why they're there. I'm not mentioning that in that way. But what I'm highlighting is they really don't make any difference anymore, because it doesn't matter what I do. It's God's will that will give me Jannah or the fire. It's not in my hands. I can't earn it. I don't earn paradise, nor do I earn the fire of hell. It's only God. I just have to do the duty that He gave me and to see what He will do with me. But then He told me that He is merciful. And He told me He is generous. And He told me that He is latif. And that He is gentle with His slaves. So I have a good opinion that He will not throw me into the fire of hell. But فَعَالٌ لِمَا يُرِيدُ. Allah does what He wants. Allah. So our duty is what? It's important to understand that framework. And then what's my duty in life? Worship. So what is ibadah? What is worship? When we say your duty is to worship, what does that mean? So ibadah, this is why when I walked in I said, I wish if I could have used that whiteboard, right? Because it would have been easier to put all of this onto the whiteboard, because you can have an image of it in your mind. But because we don't have a whiteboard, then you're going to have to use your imagination to picture what I'm trying to say. So ibadah has two types. So imagine I've written an ibadah at the top now, right? And I've drawn two little lines coming down. Ibadah has two types. So we're talking about connecting to Allah, right? This is what we're talking about. And we can't do that, only God can do that. But what He's told us to do is what? Ibadah, worship. So this is what we got to work with. So ibadah has two types. One are what I call an-najat. Worship by which or through which you will be saved. Salvation. Worship which is required for salvation. So let's put that on this side. And then you have at-taqarrubat, which is worship that will draw you nearer to Allah. And they are two distinct categories. The first category, which was what? Worship that will save you on the Day of Judgment. These have, in the Hanafi school, for example, two categories. And in generally the other schools, it will be considered under one broad category, which are fara'id, fard, obligations. In the Hanafis, they make a distinction of fara'id and wajibat, technically both coming under the same category with a slight difference, but that's a separate subject area. So fara'id and wajibat, these are what? Obligations and necessities. Things that Allah has obliged upon you to do, and things that He's made necessary for you to do. Like, for example, the 4 fard of dhuhr. What are they called? Fard. These are in the najat types of worship, which means what? Which means that doing that, those 4 fard of dhuhr, the 2 for fajr, the 4 for asr, the 3 for maghrib, the 4 for isha, and the 3 witr in the Hanafi school, which are wajib, these things will save you salvation, but they will not draw you close to Allah. They don't draw you close to Allah. They just save you on the Day of Judgment. That was your basic duty. Paying your 2.5% annually on a lunar year of your surplus wealth, your extra savings that you were able to save for a year, zakat, this is from the najat. It will save you on the Day of Judgment. It will not bring you closer to Allah. Making one hajj in your lifetime, man istata'u ilayhi sabila, the one that is able to do so from a perspective, from a monetary perspective or a health perspective, will not bring you closer to Allah on this side, but it will save you on the Day of Judgment. So these are najat. And I'll give you an example of this. It's like a guy, so we've got a workplace here. So one guy comes in and his clock in time is 9 a.m. and his clock out is 5 p.m. You know that horrible time of 9 a.m. and 5 p.m., right? So 9 a.m., 5 p.m. One guy comes in every day, doesn't miss a day. 9 o'clock he clocks in, 5 p.m. he clocks out. On the dot. Not a minute before, not a minute later. Every task his manager gives him, or the boss or the owner, or whatever it may be, gives him, he does it. But he doesn't go over and beyond duty. He doesn't take his laptop home and work from home. He doesn't think about work. 5 o'clock he clocks out. Allah ne wala. He goes home. He does not care about anything after that. But he does his job. The manager says, he is a good colleague, a good employee. He does his job. I've got no issues with him. So he says to him, 5 o'clock clocking out. Alright mate, see you tomorrow. Off he goes. Nothing special, but nothing less of what he was asked to do. This is like the najat. You don't get a pat on the back for doing the najat. You don't. You just get, you did your job, off you go. See, the takarrubat are like the guy who's really desiring promotion and wants to do well, wants to move up in his career path. He wants to please his boss. And he wants to move up because he wants a pay rise, he wants to do better, he wants to just generally progress. Which is normal for a lot of people, but not for everybody. So this guy clocks in at what time? 8 o'clock in the morning, 7:30, walks in, coffee made, jacket off, computer on, and he goes above and beyond his call of duty. Above and beyond. The manager sees this guy, man, I don't even need to say it, he's already done it. He preempts, he thinks of ideas, he improvises himself. And he stays late, he accompanies me, he makes sure that everything is done, he picks up the left pieces. So what happens? Over time, the manager or the boss begins to what? Trust him. He begins to like him. And so he makes him team leader. He makes him a supervisor. He makes him assistant manager. When boss isn't in, who's his representative? That guy. Because he knows, even if I'm not there, I can rely on him to take care of it. He will not clock out at 5 o'clock, but he will stay later to make sure that everything is done. I can rely on him. And so he becomes closer to the boss, closer to the manager, and he raises in ranks until he becomes a representative. Hey, is this not what Allah said in Surah Baqarah? وَإِذْ قَالَ رَبُّكَ لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ إِنِّي جَاعِلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً. When your Lord said to the angels, I am going to create in the earth a representative. Look at the word Allah used, Khalifa. Someone that will represent me my attributes on earth. And if you look at the Prophet, the greatest of Allah's Khalifas, he had Jamal and when needed Jalal, just like Allah. See, Allah is Rahman, is Rahim, is Latif, He's As-Salam, He's Al-Ghaffar, He's all of these things, right? Beautiful names. But then He's Jabbar, He's Qahhar, He's the Avenger, He's the one that compels. Allah He's Al-Adal, just. And these attributes of God, Jamali and Jalali, they make up the entire universe, don't they? Because you have a bright sunny day, not that often in England, of course, but you know, you have it sometimes, a bright sunny day. It's beautiful. Some days you have a tornado, again, not in England, alhamdulillah, not yet, right? But you may have a tornado, you may have a tsunami. This is, Allah is teaching us about Himself through His creation. So a Khalifa is the same. The Prophet ﷺ, Ra'uf al-Rahim, bil mu'mineen, Ra'uf al-Rahim. He was extremely merciful, extremely kind to the believers. But the Prophet ﷺ, when it came to somebody disobeying Allah and the Sharia, the Prophet was really tough. Did the Prophet not go to wars? Was there no Badr? Was there no Uhud? Was there no Khandaq? Was there no Tabuk? Of course, all of these ghazawat, all of these, they occurred. Absolutely they did. Khalifa, a total representative of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allah says, I'm going to create my Khalifa on this earth. That's what it means to represent Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on this earth. And in all of His attributes. So, I forget the bit that I was mentioning just before I mentioned Khalifa. Sorry? Aywa. So, the employee, right, who becomes, until he becomes the na'ib, he becomes the second in command, because he earned that through his extra. So then you've got these at-taqarrubat, and I'll try to wrap this up quickly. So now if you take these taqarrubat, this is a formula. So now let's forget about the najat. We don't need to talk about them anymore. They are not going to do anything more than saving you on the Day of Judgment. So let's put them over here. Now the topic of the title is what? Is how to connect to Allah. How to achieve that qurb, how to achieve ma'iyyah, that witness with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it comes into this category of at-taqarrubat. And they have two, just like the najat, but I don't want to go into that. They have two further categories. Can you see why the whiteboard would have been good? They have two further categories. One, they are called imtithali, and the other ones are called ijtinabi. Imtithali means those actions that you should do. You should do them. And ijtinabi means those actions which should be avoided. Which should be avoided. So you have imtithal and you have ijtinab. Now, before I go into these two categories, when we're talking about taqarrubat, we're talking about actions, aren't we? We're talking about things that you can do to connect to Allah or to become closer to Allah. There's two types of actions. Again, like I said, I want you to concentrate on this. There's two types of, and this is a formula tried and tested by our mashayikh of achieving that connection. So like I said, I'm only going to regurgitate what they have said. So they mentioned that there's two types of actions. One actions which are called lazim, and the others which are called ta'addi or muta'addi. Now what this means is, there's an action, lazim, which means the action does not move beyond me. Like for example, I read Quran in my house. Nobody can hear me. Or I pray 2 rak'ah. I come into the masjid, Allahu Akbar, and I pray 2 rak'ah. Now, did anybody else benefit from my action? No, I benefited from my action. This is called lazim. It's only for me. It doesn't move past myself. This is for me. Ta'addi, which means it's transitive. It moves from me to someone or something else. So I finish my 2 rak'ah, tahiyyat al-masjid, mathalan, for example, and I finish, Salam alaikum rahmatullah, Salam alaikum rahmatullah, and then I raise my hands, Allah say, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad, and I say, Ya Allah, have blessed the ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Ya Allah, have mercy upon the ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Ya Allah, my neighbor, he was struggling, he told me yesterday that he had this issue. Ya Allah, make it easy for him. Ya Allah, open up the doors of your mercy for him. Ya Allah, pour upon your mercy. Now, am I doing a good action? So I'm benefiting, right? But is somebody else benefiting from my action? Aywa. Now the action is moving away from myself to somebody else. So now there's two rewards. And if I start to say, Ya Allah, every fard, every individual in the ummah of the Prophet, Ya Allah, make easy their affairs. Have mercy upon them. Open your doors of faith upon them. Guide their hearts. Forgive their sins. Hey, how much reward is this? Can you count for every person? And then the Prophet ﷺ mentioned what? Every time you make dua, supplication for your brother or sister in their absence, that dua is mustajaba. It is guaranteed acceptance. And then in another narration, the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, when you make dua for your brother or sister in their absence, Allah appoints an angel that says, وَلَكَ مِثْلُ ذَلِكَ, and for you the same, and for you the same, and for you the same. And so now, you are guaranteed the acceptance of the dua, whereas if you made it for yourself, you are not necessarily what? Guaranteed that dua to be accepted. And the same dua you are making, there's an angel that is making that dua for you. Allahu Akbar. Can you see the benefit? And this is why Sayyida Nisa Fatimah Zahra al-Butul radiyallahu anha bint Muhammad, the daughter of the Prophet ﷺ, she used to make dua the entire night, and she never once used to make dua for herself. Did you know that? Fajr used to begin and she would not have made dua for herself. She would be making dua the entire night for the ummah, for the people that she knows, and she would not make. Why? She knew the formula. She understood where taqarrub lies, where qurbiyah, where that proximity with Allah lies. It lies in that. Why? Because the reward multiplies when it moves away from myself. So now we've understood taqarrubat, they have lazim and they have muta'addi. From these two, which one's greater? The muta'addi. The ones that move away from myself and they begin to affect. That could just be picking litter up outside. My action has helped the environment. Not wasting water, whatever it may be. It moves away from, I got the reward for a good deed anyway. Niyatul mu'min khairun min amali. The intention of the believer is better than the action. I got my reward, but I actually brought benefit to something else. So now, beneath these two, there are two more categories that I mentioned. Imtithali, istinabi. Things that you do and things that you avoid. And so now, that's the same for lazim. Let's put that there. And now let's talk about ta'addi, because we're trying to learn a formula here. So let's work on ta'addi. It's the same in lazim. You can just use the analogy yourself. Under this ta'addi of nafal actions, extra actions, beyond the fara'id, which now move on to other people or to other things, they are now the things that you can do. So for example, I could make dua for you. That is something that I'm doing for you, isn't it? Ijtinabi means I can prevent harm from coming to you, to avoid something. Or I myself can avoid being a harm for you. I can avoid being a harm for you. Now the ulama mention here, and this is the last point that I want to mention on this, is the ulama mention, the mashayikh mention, that ijtinabi are greater than imtithali. Avoiding something is better than doing something. For example, they give an analogy that if I'm sick, let's say I'm unwell. Allah gives shifa to all of those that are unwell. Ameen. So let's say I'm unwell. And the doc says to me, you need to avoid X, Y, Z. Let's say I've got high blood pressure, right? Allahul Musta'an. Asians. It's going to come one day, right? Allah protect us. And he says, look, you need to take that salt out of your diet. Salt needs to go. And there's garam food, right? Take it out. All of this X, Y, whatever it may be, take it out. And then he says, and look, and I've got this medicine for you. Take this and it will hasten the process of you getting better. Now look, if I do not desist from those things that are prolonging my illness, it doesn't really matter how much medicine I take. Because I can take the medicine, but the reason for why I'm sick is not going to go away because I'm not avoiding what the doctor told me to avoid. Whereas, if I avoid what he told me to avoid, but I don't take the medicine, it's often hoped that it may take longer, but eventually I will get better, providing I am not feeling the illness, providing I am not doing what is prolonging my illness. Do you get the point? It may take longer for my healing, because I'm not taking the medicine. I'm not doing imtithali, what I was supposed to be doing. But so long as I am avoiding what the doctor is telling me is the cause of my problem, ijtinabi, there is guaranteed I will get better, even though the journey may take longer. Hey, likewise here, if I can, my actions are for other people, and then it is in removing harm, or myself not becoming an obstacle in their lives, then that is the best thing that I can do, even though if I coupled it, with the imtithali, I would reach that destination of what? Connecting our hearts to the divine. That process of ma'iyah, I would get there extremely quick, or quicker, but I would still get there, even if my nafil was not a lot, but I was not a harm for other people, or I removed harm from other people's lives. This is a formula. And so, for example, let me give you an example, or a case study to make it a bit straightforward to understand, I think, or I hope. If I'm sat in my room, and I open up the Quran, and I want to recite the Quran. Now, right now, do I have to recite Quran? I'm not in Salah, do I? So it's nafil, isn't it? It's extra for me to now read Quran. Read the Quran. From downstairs, my brother says to me, or not my brother, that it may fall into obligation, but somebody on the road or someone shouts out saying, help, I need some help. My car's broken down, I need someone to help push it. Now, in that situation, is it obligatory for me to go and help him? No, it's not obligatory. It's not obligatory for me to go and help him. It's nothing. It's a good action outside of the najat, taqarrubat, this side over here. It's a fi'l. Which type of fi'l is it? Lazim or muta'addi? Muta'addi, because it's affecting somebody else. Whereas reading Quran is which type? Lazim. So if I know the principle, at that point I should close the Quran, and I should realize that the greater reward is in me going and helping that guy. Now, there could be two guys. I'm walking down the stairs, for example, and my brother says to me, or somebody, says to me, for example, I'm just giving an example. They may not even be particularly good examples. I'm just trying to make the point clear. So my brother or somebody else, I'm walking out and he says to me, for example, teach me how to read the Quran. Now, learning to read the Quran beyond the Fatiha is not wajib. Isn't the amount الواجب يعني ما يوصل إلى الوجوب واجب, right? Whatever helps you fulfill an obligation is an obligation. So in your salah, the minimum recitation is what? Surah Fatiha and a minimum of one long verse or three short verses. This will fulfill the obligatory aspect of the salah, or the wajib of the salah, which is the Fatiha, right? Beyond that, it's sunnah. Do you see the point? So for example, I'm going to just highlight a fiqh point here for you now. If I'm reciting in salah, let's say we do jama'ah here for Isha, although I think everybody's praying at Isha, and I'm standing and I say, for example, and I start reading Alif Lam Mim, ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ هُدًى لِلْمُتَّقِينَ الَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْغَيْبِ وَيُقِيمُونَ الصَّلَاةَ وَمِمَّا رَزَقْنَاهُمْ يُنْفِقُونَ. Have I achieved the obligation right now? What's after that? ينفقون الذين يؤمنون بما أنزل إليك وما أنزل من قبلك وبالآخرة هم يوقنون, etc. All of this now is sunnah recitation. It's now what? Sunnah recitation. If I made a mistake in that recitation, it does not affect my prayer. You see the point? Whereas if I made a mistake in one of the first three verses, now there could be a problem, and rectifying it has its methods, which it's appropriate for a lesson of fiqh. So this now becomes the sunnah aspect of the prayer, extra. So what's the wajib amount of Quran that you have to know? Which is enough, which is what you need to be able to pray your salah properly. So I'm walking down the stairs and he says to me, can you teach me, help me memorize, for example, I don't know, X, Y, and Z Surah Yasin. And I know he knows his Fatiha, he knows the juz of Quran, he's fine, mashallah, right? But he wants me to help him. For example, just giving you an example. And the guy's still outside the house saying, hey, help me, I'm getting late for work. I'm getting late for work. I need someone to help me push the car. So now, both actions are from the taqarrubat. Both of them are from the muta'addi. One of them is imtithali, something that I should do, but one of them is going to remove harm from somebody. So according to the formula, which one should I choose and which one should I delay or defer? So I wouldn't not do it, let's say, but I should defer it. Which one of the two should I give precedence to? Why? Because you're removing harm from him. And the Prophet ﷺ said, Allah is in the awn. He is in the support of his slave as long as his slave is in the support of his brother. That's a promise from the Prophet ﷺ. As long as you are helping somebody, Allah will be helping you. You don't need to watch your back. You've got Allah to do that for you. You just watch out for other people. So, if we are true journey to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we have to prioritize our deeds. Because clearly, it's not going to be for everybody. I'm sure many of you amongst here, will be, mashallah, doing excellent. But if I speak for myself, I'm going to have to prioritize my deeds because I just don't have the will or the capacity. I have the God-given capacity, but my own shortcomings, I'm not going to achieve everything. I'm not going to be Abu Hanifa and do an entire qira'at of Quran in 2 rak'ahs. I'm not going to pray my fajr with the same wudu for my isha because I've been standing the entire night, in worship to Allah. I'm not going to do that. I have to recognize some people maybe can. No, me personally have to recognize my limitations and recognize that I'm just not there. So if I learn this formula, at least I can prioritize the bits that I can do. Where should I focus my attention? And so if we learn this formula, we know, okay, I'm doing that, I have to do them. There's no pat on the back for that. I'm just getting in this section, it's better for me to help other people than for me to be occupied in my own worship. And from that, it is better for me to remove harm from people's lives, or to not become a difficulty. And I finish with the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, very famous, where he said, Al-Muslim man salim al-Muslimuna min lisanihi wa yadihi. He said, a Muslim is he who, from whose hand and tongue Muslims are safe. And we can extend this to everybody, right? Why did he say that to us? Why did he say that? Because the greatest act of worship you can do is to not be an obstacle for other people and to remove difficulty from their lives, which is why the Prophet likened faith to removing harm out of the street or out of the way, to remove harm from people's lives. So now, if you look now, so understanding this, now look back at the stories of the awliya, at those saints. All of the mashayikh that we honor and we revere and we look up to, what do you notice? في خدمة الخلق. They were in service to Allah's creation, weren't they? If you go to the Asian subcontinent, this is not restricted to the subcontinent, to Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, etc. But it is something which is found a lot there, which is they had a concept where they like to feed. So you'd have a great sheikh, for example, and he would have like a zawiya. He would have like a type of, an institution, a bit like Hamim, let's say, right? And so there would be a sheikh that would sit there and he would teach people and he would help them on their spiritual journeys. Say to them, look, try this, because he's already been through the journey, and like an older brother, he's now helping other people on these journeys. He was a sheikh and he would help his students, etc. If you look at those, now, to be honest, many of them do not really fulfill their functions anymore. And that's trying to avoid being negative towards believers. But it's a fact that many of them do not fulfill that function. But those that do still, and definitely the ones that did, historically, the thing that they were most notable for was feeding poor people. They had huge, lines of poor people, and they would know every single evening that you would go there and you would get food. And till this day, there are places that you can go in these lands where till this day they are feeding people. It doesn't matter who comes. You could be rich, poor, Muslim, non-Muslim, good, bad, makes no difference to them. The food is being served, anybody who wants to come, eat and eat. Why? Because They knew the formula. They learnt. And that's why whenever you look, and I'll give you one story, right? Shaykh Muhammad Karam Shah Al-Azhari, عليها rahmatul bari, one of the great scholars of Pakistan who passed away, in 1997. It was very famous that they went, him and his wife used to feed, so his Darul Uloom now has over 120 branches in Pakistan. It's like massive, like they've got tens of thousands of students. But it all began with 5 students and then it came 20 and etc. How it grows, with these awliya, they begin teaching under a tree, don't they? So he had, quite a few students by this time, and the food used to come from his house. My own teacher, Shaykh Muhammad Imdad, when he began his Darul Uloom, at that time when they had around about 15 students who were boys, young boys, we're talking about 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds, 14-year-olds, that age, his wife used to cook for them 2 meals a day and their own 6 or 7 children. And she did this for years. Can you imagine that type of khidmah? Can you imagine husband comes home to wife and he says, okay, basically, my 20 students that study in that next door house which they gave up for the Darul Uloom. He had it and he gave it for the Darul Uloom, his own Darul Uloom, right? And he said, now we're going to start sending, so now how many, they generally at that time, they were all Asian, so they eat chapatis, right? So how many chapatis do you think that they were eating, each boy? Come on, we're talking a minimum of 2, right? 1, 2 chapatis. So you just do the math now. How many chapatis you got to make to feed 20 people, 20 young boys, and they're boys, they've left their parents to come and study, so now and then you've got your own 6, 7. This is wilaya. This is wilaya. This is sainthood. Khidmatul khalq. Khidmatul khalq. This is what it was all about. And so they went to their shaykh, and let me finish on this, right? So they went to their shaykh, and so his wife complains about her husband, Shaykh Abdul Shah rahmatullah alayh, and she says, rahimahullah, she says that I'm feeding and cooking all day for the students, and I don't get time for my awrad that you gave me. He gave her things to read, like you need to read this in the morning, read Surah Yasin, read this, read that, etc., right? And she's like, I don't get time to make my awrad. What's she complaining about? I don't get time to make my nafil. I don't get time to recite a lot of Quran, and I don't get time to make dhikr. And you know what Shaykh Karam Shah said? He said to the Shaykh, he said, tell her that give her reward to me. She gives her reward to me, and she can take my reward. She could take my reward of dhikr and the awrad and the Quran and the teaching and the writing. He was a prolific writer and a great speaker and a great teacher. Teaching Bukhari and all of the major books. I mean, he was one of the great masters of the sciences, of the rational sciences, the ma'qulat and the manqulat. He was a great. She could take all of that reward. She just give me the reward for feeding the students. And she said no. She just wanted to, she wanted to highlight her pain or her struggle, but she knew where the reward was. You see, khidmatul khalq. And so now when you look at the awliya, you realize they learnt the formula. And so really, Allah give me tawfiq to act upon this, Allah give you tawfiq to act upon this. Now really, it's about that. It's about being in the service of other people is the greatest means to achieving that connection and that ma'iyah with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to purify our hearts, to help us grapple and to wrestle. And I use the word grapple on purpose because a battle with the nafs is not about domination. You pick a fight with the nafs and he is going to go to war with you. And going to war with the nafs is no easy matter. It's no easy matter. But to be prepared for war is to understand the strategy of warfare and to learn when to let him get on top so that you can plan your next move to bring him back down. And this is one of the most difficult journeys because this is the only journey. This is the only journey. And so we ask Allah, Allahumma arina al-haqqa haqqa wal-batila batila. Allah, show us truth as it is and show us falsehood as it is. Allow us to see the tricks of Satan and to see the prompting of our own nafs and allow us to learn the art of wrestling and to be able to grapple so that we can ultimately win that war and win that fight with ourselves. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, inshallah, we are all brothers and sisters on this journey together, and we ask Allah that He pours upon us His mercy, that He helps us on this journey, that He aids us in this journey, and Ya Allah, we expose our weakness, Ya Rabb. We have no shame or shyness in saying that we are weak, we are unable, we fall short, we cannot do it. All power is yours, the only will is your will, the only say is your say, the word is your word. Whatever you want is what happens. We are totally and utterly unable to do anything, Ya Allah. But because of your karam, because of your jood, because of your rahmah, because of your lutf, because of your kindness towards us, Ya Rabb, we have a good opinion that you will not create us for the fire, but that you will help us and aid us on our journeys so that we can be with you in Jannah, that we can gaze upon you in Jannah, we can be with our Prophet in Jannah, we can talk about him and sing his praises and his qasa'id in his gatherings in Jannah. Ya Allah, allow us to recite the qasa'id and these odes of praise of the Prophet whilst gazing at his face, sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Ya Allah, we beg of you, not because of our actions or our ill intentions or our brokenness, Ya Rabb, but out of your kindness, allow this gathering, what we have done today, to bring a smile onto the face of our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that he gazes at us when the angels bring him the news of what we have done, and that he looks upon us with a loving gaze, and he knows that we have not forgotten his way, and we have not forgotten about him and his sunnah and about his religion. But despite being 1438 years away from him and being distant in distant lands from him, we still remember him, we still sing his praises, we still love him, we still want to travel the path that he left us, we still want to follow in his blessed footsteps, that we still love him and we cherish and honor his name. Ya Rabbal Alameen, for this, Ya Rabbal Alameen, that you allowed us to do, make this our means of salvation and make this our means of proximity to you, Ya Rabbal Alameen. Ya Rabbal Alameen, we beg of you that you open our hearts, that you pour upon us your mercy, Ya Rabbal Alameen, and that you gaze into our hearts with your loving gaze, Ya Rabbal Alameen, and you place in our hearts that light that will show us the way, Ya Rabbal Alameen. Ya Allah, if you do not guide us, then we cannot be guided, but we believe that you will guide us, Ya Rabbal Alameen, because you are Kareem, you are Rahman, you are Rahim, you are Latif, Ya Rabbal Alameen, you are Nasir. All help comes from you, Ya Rabbal Alameen. And lastly, Ya Rabbal Alameen, you know the people that are sat here today, you know the difficulties in their lives, you know their wants and their desires, you know their issues, Ya Rabbal Alameen. You know us better than we know ourselves. You are closer to us than our own consciousness. Ya Rabbal Alameen, we beg of you, make easy our affairs, Ya Rabbal Alameen. Ya Rabbal Alameen, make easy any difficulty in our lives, Ya Rabbal Alameen. Ya Rabbal Alameen, those of us that are sat here today that have difficulties, whether it's in the form of debt, whether it's in the form of relationships, whether it's in the form of nafs, whether it is in the form of work, whatever it may be, Ya Kareem, you know the test that you gave us. Make those adversities opportunities, make those difficulties means by which you bring us close to you, Ya Rabbal Alameen. Do not make us people that are given the tests, that have to endure the tests and have no results afterwards, Ya Rabbal Alameen. But allow us to hop past them and to use them as springboards into your proximity, Ya Rabbal Alameen. Ya Akram al-Akrameen, we ask you for everything that our Prophet asked you for, and we seek refuge in you from everything that he sought refuge in. Sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sahbihi sallam. Wa sallillahumma wa sallim wa barik ala al-Mustafa wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. Ameen bi rahmatika ya arhamar rahimin.